was a devastating attack of terrorism, and Israel has every right, and we've said this consistently, every right to defend itself. Israel is a friend and an ally. We have close links with the people of Israel, and they should grow in the coming months and years. But what is happening now is wrong. The withdrawal of aid and the blockade of aid and the inability of people who could get that aid where it is needed straight away, their inability to do that because of a choice being made by a government is wrong. And he is right to remind us about what happened on the 7th of October. And we are all right to hold in our hearts and our minds the plights of those hostages still being held. But that does not make it right to withhold food from hungry children.
My Lords, I also declare an interest.
My Lords, we'll leave the Bishop neck and then the Level Friend.
My Lords, I also declare an interest, having just returned myself from Israel, Palestine, last week. And as we talk about humanitarian aid, would the Noble Minister agree that the horrors we're now seeing in Gaza cannot and should not be separated from the tensions and conflicts in the West Bank, and that what we are seeing across the whole of the occupied Palestinian territories of Gaza, East Jerusalem and the West Bank are all part of one and the same thing: a diminishing of human dignity and equality, a dispossession of land and identity, and a violation of the Israeli government of the right of Palestinian people to self-determination.
I was in Ramallah in the West Bank myself a couple of weeks ago, and I spoke to families who've been forced to move, and it is right that we're reminded that we cannot just separate what's happening in Gaza and what is happening in the West Bank. It is part of, it's the same government undertaking all of this. And what struck me, I think, from the conversations I had, was just the level of fear that there is in all communities in Israel, in the West Bank. And I think that it's important that, in as much as we can, the UK uses its ability to influence to try and work alongside the US, alongside Egypt, alongside Qatar, to try and get some kind of negotiated settlement here so that there can be a ceasefire, so that the hostages can be released, and so that we can get the aid where it is needed.
My Lords, these exchanges, as usual, are rightly reasonably calm and measured, but they don't get near, in my view, to getting close to the horrors that we see on our television screens, on news bulletins, night after night after night, with one horror overtaking another, and the latest, of course, seeing starving people herded into the south of Israel and food supplies being used as a weapon of war. And one report last week that encapsulates it all, in my view, of a mother, a doctor, at a hospital in the south of Gaza, losing 9 of her 10 children in an airstrike, aged from 6 months to 10 years. I don't know what the right language is to describe this, whether it's carpet bombing or genocide or whatever. But I do know that what that is evil, and I would love to hear my noble friend and my government describe it in precisely those terms.
Well, if I'm learning one thing about this job, it's that you can use whatever words and you can make whatever statements you like. And yes, it does have some effect. It is galvanising. It is important that the people of our country know where their government stands. It's important that we work with our partners and allies internationally to make clear the position of the United Kingdom. But what happens here, what happens next, lies squarely in the hands of quite a small group of people in the Israeli government. And I would have hoped that the statements that have been made, the information that we now have coming out of Gaza, would have led to a change in position, because the scheme that they've come up with is clearly failing. It's going to lead to more death, more starvation, more desperation in that community, and ultimately more violence. What needs to happen is we need to get everybody who can around the table so that the dialogue can begin again and we can get to the ceasefire that we so desperately want to see.
My Lords, that concludes oral questions for today. Any members who wish to leave the chamber now may do so. My Lords, private notice question on the detention of Alaa Abd el-Fattah, Lord Black of Brentwood.
My Lords, I beg leave to ask a question of which I have given private notice. The question is as follows. To ask His Majesty's Government what action they are taking to secure the release from prison in Egypt of British citizen Alaa Abd el-Fattah in light of the condition of his mother Laila Soueif, who is at risk of death as a result of her ongoing hunger strike in protest at her son's detention.
I thank the Noble Lord for his question, and can I say both I and the Foreign Secretary were deeply concerned at Laila Soueif's hospitalisation on Thursday, and certainly our officials are in regular contact with the family, and of course the Prime Minister had met Laila only on the 14th of February. The Foreign Secretary raised the case on the 1st of June with the Egyptian Foreign Minister, and the Minister for Middle East raised with the Egyptian Ambassador on the 31st of May. Can I assure the Noble Lord that the Egyptian government is fully aware of the importance we attach to Mr el-Fattah's case, and we will continue to press for an urgent resolution.
I thank the Noble Lord the Minister for that answer. I'm sure the thoughts of the whole House will be with the courageous Dr. Soueif, who lies gravely ill in hospital as a result of the incredibly brave stand she is taking to secure the release of her son, whose detention in Egypt has been found by the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention to be in breach of international law. Can I thank the Noble Lord and the Government for all they are doing to secure his release? The Prime Minister's direct intervention with President Sisi is very welcome. But given the extreme urgency of this tragic situation and the ongoing deliberate violation of the UK's consular rights, is it not clear that words are no longer sufficient? Will the Government now consider further concrete measures, including targeted sanctions, revising FCO travel guidance relating to Egypt, and proceedings in the International Court of Justice to secure the immediate release of Alaa Abd el-Fattah and bring comfort to his mother in what may be her final hours?
I hear what the Noble Lord says, but our priority, our absolute priority, remains securing Mr el-Fattah's urgent release and engaging the highest levels of the Egyptian government. The government judges the best way to achieve this is engagement with the Egyptian government at a bilateral level. We approach this case based on its individual merits and specific political context. But I would reassure the Noble Lord that we take this matter seriously and urgently. And let me say that we are in constant touch to ensure that we seek his release in the very near future.
Associate myself with the words of the Noble Lord with regard to the concern of Mr Abd el-Fattah's family, his mother, and of course his own safety as well. This is an illegal detention as defined by the United Nations, and the refusal of consular access is what we would consider to be a breach of international humanitarian law. I appreciate the diplomatic representations that have been made at the highest levels, including the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary and the Minister. But will the Minister agree with me that the time now is so urgent that it requires concrete action? Those two that could be done in two areas. One, the travel advice for those British citizens to Egypt could be updated urgently to say that it is not safe to travel to Cairo, given the fact that British citizens would be treated in such a way. And secondly, it's now just a year ago that the UK-Egypt Development Partnership was agreed by the previous administration. Surely the government should signal that that partnership agreement must be paused in order for there to be a swift response and release of Mr el-Fattah.
All of these matters are a judgment call, and it's certainly the government's judgment at this stage that the best approach to secure the urgent release of Mr el-Fattah is through that bilateral contact at the highest possible levels. And of course we have been consistent in our support to Mr el-Fattah and his family. Of course the Egyptian authorities do not recognise his British nationality and see him only as an Egyptian national. But our consular staff have therefore been unable to visit in prison. But they are in regular contact with Mr el-Fattah through his lawyer and his family. But I would repeat, at this stage, we are absolutely committed to that bilateral contact in order to see the urgent release of Mr el-Fattah.
I stood with the daughter of Dr. Soueif outside St Thomas's yesterday, and there were a lot of journalists there. The call was mainly because of the extreme urgency of the situation and the fact that it appears to be President Sisi's own personal obsession to keep the young man in prison. Really, our contact should not be only at the diplomatic level, but with our Prime Minister to the President, and also with the Prime Ministers and the Presidents of our allies, such as President Macron, who also has a relationship with the Egyptian government. Isn't it imperative to find out what is the real reason for keeping Alaa in prison? Is it in his influence on the young people of Egypt? What is it? So that the right trigger can be used to persuade President Sisi to let him out before his mother dies, which is possibly a matter of days.
Well, I think, I share my noble friend's concern about the condition of Laila, very, very concerned, and we remain in constant touch with the family about her condition. But let me just remind what I have told the House. The Prime Minister raised Mr el-Fattah's case with the Egyptian President Sisi on the 22nd of May, and previously wrote to President Sisi on the 4th of May. The Foreign Secretary has also discussed Mr el-Fattah's case with the Egyptian Foreign Minister on a number of occasions, and spoke again on the 1st of June to press the urgency of the situation. And certainly Minister Faulkner has discussed this case multiple times with the Foreign Minister of Egypt, and most recently on the 25th of May, and certainly with the Ambassador on the 31st of May. The National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell, raised Mr el-Fattah's case in a phone call with the Foreign Minister on the 27th of April. Let me reassure this House that we are absolutely determined to ensure that Mr el-Fattah is released, and we are maintaining that contact at the very highest levels.
My Lords, I think all sides of the House are united that Mr el-Fattah's continued detention in Egypt is an incredibly serious matter. As my noble friend said, the UN have concluded that he is being held arbitrarily by the Egyptian authorities and should therefore be released immediately under international law, which the Egyptian government is breaking. The UN panel set a 6-month deadline for the authorities to release Mr el-Fattah and investigate the violation of his rights. So could the noble Lord, the Minister, please update the House on what the government plans to do if this 6-month deadline is allowed to elapse with no change in his situation?
Well, of course, the UN decision as the state detaining Alaa, it is for Egypt to respond to the recommendations of the working group. It doesn't have the same sort of legal status, and we take the working group's findings absolutely seriously, which is why we've been consistent in calling for Alaa's release. So I repeat, the Egyptian authorities have to respond to that working group report. But as far as we are concerned, we are determined to follow our bilateral approach at the highest possible levels to make the strongest possible case.
Is it not time, given that the mother Laila is in hospital and could die this week, is it not time to do something more than talk?
Well, I don't know what the noble lady would suggest, but can I just reassure the House that, these are a judgment call, and maybe, my absolute sincere hope, and I think it's shared by both the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary, that we can support Alaa's mother and ensure that Laila is safe. But we're going to do that, ensuring at the highest possible levels, working with the Egyptian authorities, conveying our strong message to seek his urgent release. It's a judgment call, but I think at this stage we are making the right judgment.
I don't want in any way to underestimate the importance of the bilateral efforts the government is making and the Prime Minister has personally made. But surely, given the strategic importance to the United States of Egypt and the very significant aid that supports Egypt and Egypt's military from the United States, the Prime Minister's strong relationship with President Trump should also be leveraged to try and get justice in this case.
Well, I think the noble lord is right that we should use all possible avenues to amplify our bilateral call, and we are certainly working with allies to do that. But of course, at this stage of the game, it is really important that we focus on our specific call.
As a mother, my heart goes out to the mother of Alaa, and
My Lords, can we hear from the noble lady? Thank you.
my lords, as a mother, my heart goes out to Laila Soueif. I can't imagine the pain that she and her family are going through. And given that the Egyptian Parliament is about to go into recess for Eid, and that there may be little extra chance to have the time to negotiate bilaterally, would not some extra pressure give more comfort to the family? And are there any signs of progress at all, given the bilateral talks that have been had at the highest level, that can give any such comfort?
Well, I repeat to the noble lady, these things are a judgment call, and can I reassure her and the House that we kept the family constantly informed of our efforts, and certainly we will continue to do so. But it is our hope and determination to see his early release.
My Lords, I declare interest as a former co-chair of the APPG for Egypt. What grounds does the Egyptian government give for refusing diplomatic, whether it be from the embassy or consular, access to Mr. el-Fattah whilst he's been in prison? And has the Foreign Office assembled or found or heard or satisfied themselves as to whether there has been any ill treatment of Mr. el-Fattah whilst he's been in prison?
Well, I hope I reassured the House that whilst the Egyptian authorities do not recognise his British nationality and therefore have not given us, our consular staff have not been able to see him in prison, what we have done is remained in constant touch with his lawyer and his family, and certainly through his lawyer we are able to determine his current status. I think the important thing that we have done and to support the families, keep them informed of what we're doing, but also focus very strongly at the highest level of bilateral relations.
Lords, just leading on from the question asked by the noble Lord Marsford, has the Minister reflected at all on the incredibly cruel, inhumane and squalid conditions in the Bab al-Khalt prison? And what representations have the Embassy made to the Egyptian authorities? And can you just repeat the point as well, that it's incredibly important that he is actually visited in prison by our officials so they can see for themselves these truly appalling conditions?
Well, can I reassure the noble Lord that we have asked for access, which the Egyptian authorities have so far refused. But we have been in constant touch with his lawyer. And of course, you know, he's right about some of the conditions, but we are absolutely determined to ensure that he remains safe. And we've made that case very strongly when we are seeking his urgent release. But we remain concerned, and I think I must stress that when I heard Laila on the radio, I think her determination, at whatever cost, to see the release of her son has to be greatly admired and respected.
I remember some years ago meeting President Sisi and being very struck at that time by the very close relationship which the Egyptians, both in personal terms and commercial terms, have with the Saudi Arabians. And I wonder whether it might be a good idea if we could, through diplomatic channels, encourage our representations in Riyadh to help us over this issue.
Well, I hear what the noble Lord says, and I think I responded to a previous question. Of course, we make sure all our allies are very much aware of our position and on the call on the Egyptian authorities. But I think at the end of the day, what will secure Mr. el-Fattah's release is that bilateral relationship and that bilateral call. And say, it is a difficult judgment call, but we've kept the family informed, and it is very much our hope to ensure that he is released as early as possible.
My Lords, we come now to an instrument previously debated in Grant Committee, Health and Social Care Information Standards Procedure Regulations 2025. Baroness Blake.
My Lords, I beg to move the motion standing in my name on the order paper.
The question is that this motion be agreed to. As many as of that opinion will say content. The contrary not content. The contents have it. A report of the statutory instruments